This is my digital avatar. Her name is Kimiya Kawaii, and she lives in the metaverse. So you might wonder what metaverse is. And I think you're in luck because, oh, what happened? I did something. Oh, yeah, there you go. So you're in luck because actually, you know, metaverse has so many different definitions. Everyone has their own vision, what metaverse is or should be. So one thing that we have enough of is visions in the Web3 space. So essentially what Web3 is the third version of internet. So actually I have a cheat sheet here to try to explain to you Web3 as simply as possible. So Web 1.1 was essentially web of documents, like you read things online. You had you know, your personal computers, you had Microsoft, IBM, and Intel. So it was very static, and websites and content essentially almost like library type of approach. So that was very centralized system. And now Web 2 is a decentralized system, essentially web of interactions. You have the internet, you have mobile, you have the cloud, you have Uber, Amazon, Google, Apple, Facebook, you have Airbnb. So it's all about ability to create information, share it with people, so essentially creating content. So that is a very sort of decentralized version of the internet. So the second version, Web 2. Now Web 3, it's distributed. So it's a web of datas. You have blockchain, you have protocols, you have D-apps, you have essentially ability to control your data, monetize on it, and create really immersive experiences by essentially curating technology. I've been preaching about curating technology, and you can imagine when you are in the tech world where everything is about efficiency and sort of performance, when you talk about things like artistic approach, importance of color, duration, or you know, importance of sound in creating digital experiences and frequencies, or curation, people look at you like, I don't know if this is too dreamy for us. And you know, I feel like one thing that the Web3 has really brought up, which I love, is the importance of art and creativity. Essentially, all the hype around NFTs, non-fungible tokens, essentially registered smart contracts on blockchain, are with art. So creativity and the artist essentially gets a really important role here, which I find super important and interesting. So before going to the problems and challenges, which is my favorite area in terms of greenwashing information, misusing these technologies, exploiting the society, exploiting artists, and essentially going against the whole vision of Web3, which is supposed to be better than Web 2, right? So our current internet. I created Helsinki Fashion Week about 8.5 years ago. I created it because I wanted to work in the fashion industry, and it didn't exist in Finland, where I am from. So I made one. So I designed, my background is in visual arts, product design, and I literally designed a fashion week that is relevant globally, so focusing solely on sustainability, and also works for the Finnish market because it's a small country with almost 6 million people. So, you know, the market potential isn't so high. So how do you actually compete with platforms like Paris Fashion Week or Milan or London and New York? So obviously we had to come up with our own concept to make it relevant. So sustainability, producing Fashion Week sustainably, only showcasing international sustainable designers, going through a long list of sort of requirements before taking them in, was really important aspects of what we did with Helsinki Fashion Week. In 2020, when I was producing the Fashion Week, I wanted to go even further. I mean, in 2018, we created an eco-village concept, which was based on circular society. So we built literally a village that was circular. We recycled seawater, we purified it and drink it. We sourced industry waste food, overproduced ingredients. We created our own makeup line based on natural minerals. We worked closely with different transport companies on water, land, and such. And so we took literally every single thing from architecture to mobility into consideration when building the eco-village concept. And that was essentially our first big report about how sustainable societies can be important and how sort of fashion supply chain is actually so multidisciplinary and very much related to, you know, everything we do every day and our everyday lives, essentially. So ultimately, in 2020, I was kind of sick of showrooms. We only showcase about 30 designers intentionally every year with Helsinki Fashion Week. So having a showroom with racks and clothing hanging is just boring. So I wanted to create something more immersive, something more edgy, and something really sort of different from, you know, buyers actually get to meet the designers through dinners and on backstage. So we don't really need a showroom, and it's not really an exciting experience. So I came up with an idea of creating this three-dimensional interactive room with digital fashion. We've previously, with Helsinki Fashion Week in 2017, we worked with Refik Anadol. So tech and innovation has really been very close to my career, actually, for a long, long time. So it was a very natural transition for me. But ultimately, so I decided to create this showroom. So I started looking into digital fashion, avatars, you know, LED screens, holograms, and all these technologies. And actually, one thing led to another, and then COVID happened, and we decided to go fully 3D. So we produced the world's first 3D Fashion Week. So we did that with about 200 people with about 200 people in 2 months. So it was pretty crazy. It wasn't difficult to convince the designers to do it, but it was pretty interesting. So we produced the Fashion Week. I'm going to show you this content here. We hosted over 500,000 people in 1 week, in 5 days actually. And normally we host, like, our largest number of guests in Helsinki Fashion Week has been 10,000 people. So I'm going to play this video of a little recap of what we did in almost 2.5 years ago. All right. right. So ultimately, when we transitioned, so I'm obsessed with sustainability. Let's establish that fact now. When you establish from one thing to another, you have to make it in a sustainable way as well. So by the time we wanted to go fully 3D, it was literally the world's first 3D fashion week. We had to take everything into consideration. Like, for example, the models that we had hired to walk the shows, like real people with real livelihood. So we decided to actually hire them still. And instead of creating avatars from scratch, we did create them anyway for certain reasons, but to having more models, but we essentially 3D scanned all the models and they ended up walking the show anyway. So yeah, it was really interesting experience to work with traditional fashion designers and digitizing all their collections, curating all the environments that they wanted to essentially build. Their dreams were having a fashion show in the Vatican City with Patrick McDowell, and having a fashion show in the Louvre. So we made that possible. You know, as a sustainable small designer, you don't have a big budget, so you can't necessarily do those things in the real world, but you could in the digital space. So let me just share my screen back 1 second. All right, so going back to what happened. So after the 2020 Fashion Week, the first 3D Fashion Week, we essentially, I noticed that, okay, so what is blockchain? How do you actually scale it? How can you actually create sustainable physical products by using and utilizing these tools? How can you actually improve the fashion's physical supply chain? How is the consumer of the future is going to actually purchase digital fashion in the future, and what is the relation of actually having, sorry, 1 second. All right, so what is the relationship of combining digital products and physical products? So lots of questions there, and the most important question was, is digital really more sustainable? So we did the world's first digital sustainability report, where we actually took our financial data and compared it with the eco village, which was really, like, you can't really go more sustainable than that. So we noticed that actually the digital fashion week was way more sustainable. So there was, I think it was about 300 kilogram CO2 emissions per visitor in the physical event, and 0.06 in the digital one. And of course, we did host 500,000 people. Now, what's interesting is that 90% of the emissions in the physical event was produced by only 20% of the visitors, and those 20% came from abroad, so they flew. So transportation, definitely huge contributor to the sustainability and greenhouse gas emissions. Now, what happened after I created Digital Village in 2021 April, so almost 1 year old company. So essentially our mission is to redesign our social understanding and sustainable and ethical integration of Web3 in art, design, and culture. So ultimately, there is, when you think about digital sustainability, I could go on and on and on. It's about your data, your privacy, cyberbullying, inclusivity, access, you know, economic, environmental consequences. It has mental and physical consequences. It deeply impacts your mental health, your consumption habits, your perception of yourself, the world, your time. So it's a really deep and important topic to really sort of think about. Anyway, we created two different main products for Digital Village, our marketplace where you can mint NFTs, crowdfund projects, exchange assets, export the assets to the metaverse where you can utilize them. And then we have the metaverse where we actually sell planets. So we don't sell land, but we sell independent metaverses. So we are calling ourselves a multiverse, an ecosystem of several metaverses. This is because we want to optimize the technology and become a tech provider rather than an application. And when it comes to the marketplace, when it comes to NFTs, you know, smart contracts and assets, there is a lot of sustainability related aspects there as well, like copy and IP rights, to mention a few, the energy consumption, what kind of chain to choose from, how do you think about interoperability and utility when you mint something or create an asset. So again, design has a large responsibility there again. So we are blockchain agnostic. We are supporting Ethereum and VeChain as of now. We will be adding Polygon and Polkadot, other chains soon, somewhere in April, to our site. We are calling ourselves a blockchain agnostic platform, which means that we're not just solely on Ethereum or one platform, but we're trying to support as many blockchains as possible, to really support that utility and the ecosystem to make it as interoperable as possible. So you come to Digital Village, you drop your assets, you download and create your products. You can see on the right side your profile from which you can essentially sell your assets and your creations. So the future of fashion to me is assets for betterment. So, you know, people, there is a slogan that just gives me chills and I want to just, you know, do something that I shouldn't do. But, you know, they say don't buy less, buy digital. And it's just the biggest BS there exists on the planet Earth, because it's important to really understand that just because, like, you can't consume more just because it's digital. It has consequences, like subconsciously, unconsciously, and it really actually inspires you to consume more. I'm sure there will be more researches in the future around how the internet actually impacts our consumption habits and how sort of excess can be very negative when it comes to you know, our consumption habit. The idea of encouraging people to not consume less, because that is fundamentally, inherently false. We have to consume less in every single way that you can think of. So there is no magic way of let's just you know, live in excess and ignore everything else that's happening, because, you know, we have digital fashion. So it's very, in other words, greenwashing, which is happening a lot in the industry also already, and which you need to pay attention to. So inclusive metaverses, how do, you know, Jackie can create a metaverse for Twig magazine. It should be easy and seamless. She shouldn't be excluded because she is not an engineer. So we're really trying to make it as seamless, as inclusive as possible. There shouldn't be just 6 metaverses, one of them owned by Mark Zuckerberg, to build these monopolies. But again, the vision of Web3 is to be open, inclusive, and as decentralized as possible. So one of the main core values there should be inclusivity. So how do we include people, artists, easily, seamlessly, sustainably into this new economy and lifestyle? So play to own and play to earn models, you know, how can we include people that don't have necessarily $10,000 to invest in a digital land? So gamification and using these spaces to really create social and cultural betterment is possible. So your creativity is really just the limit. And then an immersive, unreal life experiences and human-centric design. So I believe that metaverse is the first steps for IoT. So I think that metaverse will do a 360. So we go into the internet and we come out of it and we'll see it all around us in the physical world, whether it is through goggles, VR or AR or AI, I think that it's really important to build as sustainable spaces in the internet as possible, because they will eventually immerse into our physical world. So if we do terrible exploitative spaces online, then what do we do when they come into our physical lives? It's not going to be so much fun. You know, I heard some rumors about goggles that actually cancel advertisements. So which movie was it? Was it Blade Runner? Where, you know, you have the futuristic world and advertisements everywhere. It's pretty crazy and depressing, actually. Here on the right, you can see some of the assets we created a few years ago. So what is an inclusive internet? So what we strategize in Digital Village is essentially focusing on issues as addiction, cyberbullying, and overall online well-being. You know, something like sound has such a big importance. I mean, back in the days, it was used for torture. I think you can kill a man with frequency. So sound is so important. Sound can generate emotions, feelings. I mean, any of you understand that with music, and especially in South Africa, having that very rich music sort of or musical aspect. And preventing filter bubbles and segregation, rewards for ethical and sustainable action. Crypto, my favorite topic. I think cryptocurrency will happen in the future in a mass scale. I think governments will adapt it just simply for geopolitical reasons, for climate change reasons. They will use it as a tool to mobilize people to really create quick, rapid impact. So I do think that it's going to happen. We're releasing our coin as well. And then finally, education of environmentally and socially positive actions, both in Digital Village and the real life. So again, if you think that you create something for online spaces and it's going to live there and it has nothing to do with the physical world, I think you're wrong. I think you have to think about the consequences of your creation long term. Think about who gets impacted. It's almost like you create a supply chain when you create something. So the supply chain is before and after that creation. So being sustainable and conscious, you have to think about all of the whole chain and its impacts and how your work echoes, you know, whether it's mentally or environmentally. It's important questions to think about. So here is some of the worlds that we've created in Digital Village.